Alright guys, so today I'm going to be tearing into a Hayward Navigator pool sweep. These are very, very simple units. There's a lot of people online that really don't seem to like them too much because occasionally you do have to replace parts on them, but they're very easy to service. Parts are very plentiful for them. Some parts can be expensive depending on what wears out. This one, what's going on with it is basically when a pool sweep, for those of you who don't know, goes up onto the sidewall of a pool and comes back down, it's supposed to turn back down. And what mine's doing is it's just going straight and it stops. It doesn't turn really hardly at all. It does sometimes, but it is never able to fully do a job while my pool pump is working. Or on, I should say. And how these things turn is there's a gear drive inside of the pool sweep. And we'll take all this apart so you guys can see everything. But basically this little guy here is supposed to turn. And it's kind of turning right now, but it's not doing it perfectly. And every now and again, this one's right at the cusp of where it's starting to fail. So it's kind of locking up. When you rotate it around, it either comes off and kind of wants to freewheel until the teeth line up again, or it just locks up and doesn't do anything. Basically, what causes that is these are all plastic gears. And I've got a whole kit here that cost me just over $30 off of Amazon. And this should fix all of my issues. Now, I've already taken this thing apart and, I did my own troubleshooting on it before I even started making this video and before I ordered the parts. So I already know what's wrong with it, and, hopefully getting these new parts in will be good to go from there. So, got a mag tray here. I'll show you guys how to take these apart. They're very simple. But as you can see, on the bottom plate here, you have a total of 5 screws. All of these have to come off. This one is actually the one that you remove in case there's an obstruction in there and you can get it out, with your fingers or a pair of needle nose pliers. And because I'm lazy today, I'm going to use some power tools. So we'll go ahead and pull that last screw out. Really love these things. So basically just take your feet off. And we'll also pull this plate out. Set that aside. You also kind of want to look over your feet a little bit. These are another wear point. But, this video isn't about that. This one's actually kind of wearing out just a little bit. So I might buy some new feet for this thing and replace them at a later date. Now, as you guys can see at the bottom here, we have 4 screws that hold this bottom cover on. So we'll go ahead and remove these as well. And all 4 of those have been removed. We can go ahead and pull them out. And we'll take our bottom cover off, set that aside. Go ahead and thread these 2 screws out. So with those 2 screws removed, you can go ahead and pull everything out. So with the gearbox, the top little piece here, and the bottom tray, I'm going to go ahead and call it. Just set that aside. Now here's the trick. All the gears that we're going to replace are inside of this whole assembly right here. First we'll go ahead and remove this part. And what's behind here is a kind of a green impeller. And we'll be replacing this as well. And I'll show you guys, once I have everything out, just everything that you're supposed to be looking at. You want to go ahead and thread all these screws out. And you can also go ahead and remove your large impeller here. Just set that aside as well. And you kind of want to be careful. And I might have just dislodged them, so we'll just go ahead and throw it over like this. Let's go ahead and lift your top cover off. We'll set that aside as well. And so like I said, if you don't get it over just in time before you take that cover off, things start to kind of fall off. But I'll show you guys what's going on with it. Now when you rotate your large cone gear here, which is what it's called, it rotates all these other gears, which down below, you guys remember when this one was hooked up, that rotates it as well. So on occasion you're going to have to replace these, and you can kind of see it with this one. It fits really loose in there. We'll go ahead and compare that to the new one once I get the new one out of the bag. But before I get that far, we'll also show you guys what's going on here. There's a lot of slack and play. It goes back and forth like this. It's just very loose. There's a lot of play. So it's time for that to be replaced as well. Now to go ahead and remove this small gear, it's actually connected to this one with the use of a tiny little screw in there. So just get a proper size screwdriver and unscrew it. It can be kind of a pain. It might be in there kind of tight, but just with your 2 fingers hold on to that other gear in the back. To remove this, sometimes you kind of need to wiggle it back and forth and it'll come out just like that. This one's actually starting to disintegrate a little bit, it looks like. That might be chlorine though, but not too sure about that. And so you have the small gear. Go ahead and set that aside as well. We're also going to be replacing this little sheath that goes in here. And in order to do that, just kind of, you might need to find some ways to tap it out. If it's in there seized solid, but I was able to get it out with a pair of needle nose, so we'll set that aside as well. Now we have our new bag of goodies here. That's the part number, manufacturer number, everything you need to look it up for yourself. So we'll go ahead and open this up. Pull out our large blue gear. As well as these. So it's actually interesting because they give you a couple new studs here to put the new gears on. But I want to show you guys just how much of a difference there is with these new gears compared to the old ones. They even include a new screw, so we'll be using that. We can go ahead and throw this one in. That just goes back in like so. Just press it back in. I'm going to go ahead and remove that as well. I can show you guys how much of a difference there is with these new gears. So like I was saying before, when you had to wiggle that other one out, I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up all that well, but you can see that it's got a hex end on the end of it, and it just goes right into this one. So I'll go ahead and stick this one on, and we can already tell right now, just it sitting in there, there's not really all that much play. So go ahead and stick our white gear on the bottom. Installing it's pretty much the reverse as before. And we can already see that there is very, very little play right there. It's also not moving back and forth hardly at all. There's a hell of a difference right now. So we know we're on the right trail here. So we'll go ahead and remove this stud if I can get it out. And a little bit of finesse and it comes right out. So we'll throw the new stud in. So now we'll throw this top gear in. There is a definite difference. The old gear, there was a lot of slop and play in that one. This new one, it's a lot better now. So now throw your cone gear back on. Make sure you're happy with how everything is. When I was rotating it earlier, this big gear here was kind of going all over the place, just flopping everywhere. And I'll show you guys the difference with the old gear. A lot of slop. The new one, hardly any. So now that this part is done, go ahead and throw our cone gear on, and now we can get to this one. This one just comes off really easy. As you can see, there's also a lot of play in this one. Now we'll be changing that stud out. This one, hardly any at all. These plastic parts wear out really fast, really easy. For this one, I'm actually going to gingerly try and pry it out with some channel locks. And it comes right out very easily, actually. So there's the old stud. We'll throw that away. So with the new stud in, just slides right on. Slide that down and on as well. Make sure it spins freely, and it does. It's a hell of a difference compared to the old one. So now that that's done, we can go ahead and start piecing everything back together. Make sure we have our old parts accounted for. Make sure nothing's left over inside. So it's kind of tricky putting this cover back on and making sure everything lines up how it should, because you do need to line up those 4 bottom screws. But just make sure everything is down and seated before you go ahead and put it all back together. Then just go ahead and kind of try and start them all by hand first. At least get them in the hole. It's a lot easier than trying to do it without. And I'm actually going to go ahead and thread these in by hand instead of using the drill, just because it's plastic and I don't want to mistakenly put a little bit too much torque into them and break the plastic. And there you have it. All 4 screws are back in. So now we can throw this piece back on. This one you also kind of want to be careful that you don't mistakenly drop that little gear in there and it doesn't line up properly. So we'll just go ahead and throw this back in. And then with it on like that, do a little bit of rotating. And so now you just throw those 2 small screws that we removed earlier back on. So I'll show you guys that there's a definite difference right now. That sounds so much better than it did before. It's actually traveling a lot more too. So before you reinstall your impeller, we're actually going to put it on the bottom plate first, so it's easier for us to install it. But these impellers are also marked the correct way that they're supposed to go back on. But you also have this little guide pin right here that goes right there. There's only really one way it can go in, but you want to make sure that you're getting this thing in the right way. Then with your impeller reinstalled, go ahead and rotate it and turn it. See how it sounds? Sounds good to me, so I'm just going to reinstall everything back on. And so with everything kosher like that, go ahead and get your back screen if you chose to remove it. Now mine actually had a bunch of algae on it, but I scrubbed it all off with a plastic wire brush. That screen right here lines up right into here. So you kind of want to get that in right. And especially if your screen's a little old, you don't want to force anything in. So this one went in nice and evenly. Now we can go ahead and put a couple of the screws back in. I'm just going to go ahead and thread these back in by hand as well. So now those are back in. We can finish this part off with putting our protective panel back on. And these screws go back in as they came out. And so now with them all back in, you can go ahead and pretty much finish this up. Throw your feet back on. These only really go in one way. So make sure it's lined up correctly. And again, since you're already here looking at everything, what drives these feet to move around is the impeller with the pressure from the pull pump. So you just want to rotate your impeller, make sure your feet are moving as they should be, and mine are. So now we'll go ahead and throw these 4 screws back in. And so now all these screws have been reinstalled. So this little flap here, that wire is supposed to go up into here. There you have that. And so we can just put our bottom section panel back on. And again, that only goes in one way. And there you have it. So now it's all fixed up. Should work just fine. So now let's get it home, throw it in the pool, and see what happens. Alright guys, so now I'm at the house. Go ahead and submerge this. Get all the air out of it. And now we'll just connect it back up. And as you guys can see, my pool is really dirty. before I turn the pump on, I'll show you guys what it would do. It would just go, it would go down there, probably get hung up on the wall, float back down, then it would just stop. So let's turn it on. And it's working so far anyways. I'll update you guys a little bit later once it starts going around the pool a little bit more. And it looks like it's working fine. I've been checking on it every now and again, and you can see there's a bunch of new trails in the pool now. I think I do need to replace those feet on it. Because I think they're supposed to move a little bit faster than that, but oh well, that's a cheap fix. Not really too worried about that. So I'll go ahead and order up those parts and go ahead and change them out. So anyways, my pool needs a damn good cleaning. Probably going to attack that tomorrow, but hope you guys enjoyed this video on how to surface those gears on one of these. And you all stay classy.